Have you ever seen 3,000 people float helplessly through the air, their screams echoing through metal corridors as coffee cups, data pads, and one very angry cat drift past their faces? Commander Jake Morrison had exactly 3 minutes to figure out what went wrong before the gravity systems rebooted and everyone came crashing down from heights that could kill. The emergency alarm screamed through Stellar Station 7, a massive research facility orbiting Jupiter's fourth moon, and Jake was sprinting through the corridor when his boots suddenly left the floor. His stomach lurched as he became weightless, his arms pinwheeling uselessly as he tumbled forward. All around him, people were floating, some gracefully, most not. He grabbed a handhold and pulled himself toward the central command, his mind racing. Gravity systems didn't just fail. They were built with 17 redundant backups. This wasn't a malfunction. Someone had deliberately shut them down. Jake. The voice cut through the chaos, musical and urgent, with that slight harmonic quality that always made his heart skip. Lyra appeared around the corner, her platinum hair floating around her face like a silver halo, her pointed ears just visible through the shimmering strands. She moved through zero gravity with the fluid grace of someone who'd grown up in space, her fitted tactical pants and form-fitting violet top, somehow looking elegant even in crisis. Her violet eyes met his, and for a moment, everything else faded. "The Cubs," she said, her luminescent skin paler than usual. "They're in the gravity control room." Jake's blood went cold. The Cubs. That's what everyone called the group of 6 children on the station, ranging from ages 5 to 12. The sons and daughters of scientists and engineers who'd been living on Stellar Station 7 for the past 2 years. His nephew Tommy was one of them. "What are they doing in there?" Jake pushed off a wall, propelling himself beside Lyra as they navigated the chaotic corridor. A floating toolbox nearly hit his head, and Lyra's hand shot out with inhuman speed, catching it before it could connect. He'd seen her reflexes before, but they still amazed him. Her people, the Astryn, had evolved on a low-gravity moon, giving them enhanced spatial awareness and reaction times that made them invaluable on space stations. "I don't know, but the security feed shows them inside, and the door sealed behind them," Lyra said, her voice tight with worry. She had a special connection with the Cubs, especially little Mira, a 7-year-old who followed Lyra everywhere, fascinated by the station's only alien resident. "We have 2 minutes and 15 seconds before gravity restores. If they're floating near the ceiling when that happens," she didn't need to finish. Jake knew the math. A fall from 4 meters in full gravity could be fatal for a child. They reached the gravity control room to find the door locked, its panel flashing red. Through the small window, Jake could see them, 6 children floating in the center of the room, clustered together like a bunch of balloons. Tommy, his nephew with the wild red hair, had his arms wrapped around Mira, who was crying. The older kids, twins Marcus and Sophia, were trying to keep everyone calm, but Jake could see the fear in their 12-year-old faces. And there, in the corner, young David was still floating near the control panel, his 6-year-old face frozen in horror, his finger pointing at a single glowing button. "That's the master override," Lyra whispered, her hand pressing against the window. "It's supposed to require both a code and a handprint." How did he? Jake was already working on the door panel, his engineering training kicking in. "Later. Right now, we need to get them out and get them to the floor before gravity kicks back in. Can you override the lock?" Lyra's fingers flew across the panel, faster than human eyes could follow. Her people had an intuitive understanding of technology, something about the way their minds process patterns and systems. It was one of the reasons the Astryn were such valuable crew members on human stations. It was also one of the many things Jake had come to admire about her over the past 8 months, since she'd arrived. "The system's in emergency lockdown," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "Someone programmed a security protocol I've never seen before. It's almost like..." She paused, her eyes widening. "Jake, this code structure. It's Astryn." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. "Someone from your homeworld did this?" Lyra shook her head, her hair creating a silver nebula around her face. "Not exactly, but someone who understands our programming architecture." Her fingers never stopped moving. "There's been talk. Tensions between our peoples. Some Astryn believe humans are expanding too fast, taking resources that should be shared. And some humans think we're too different, that we can't be trusted." Jake had heard the whispers too. Just last week, There'd been a protest on Mars Station, human workers demanding that alien crew members be removed from critical positions. And on Lyra's homeworld, a political faction had been gaining power, advocating for isolation from human space. But he'd never thought it would come to this. To their station. To endangering children. 90 seconds, Lyra said quietly. Jake looked through the window again. Tommy had gathered all the cubs into a tight group in the center of the room, away from the walls and ceiling. Smart kid. But the center of the room was still 3 meters from the floor. Can you get the door open? Jake asked. Not in 90 seconds. Lyra's voice cracked slightly, and he saw tears forming in her violet eyes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If my people did this. Jake grabbed her hand, squeezing it. Her skin was cooler than human, with that slight luminescent quality that seemed to glow brighter when she was emotional. Stop. This isn't your fault. And we're not done yet. An idea struck him, wild and probably stupid, but it was all he had. The emergency oxygen vents. They blow air into the room in case of fire. If we reverse them, pull air out, we can create a current. Lyra caught on immediately. Pull the cubs toward the floor vents. It won't be much but it's something. Jake was already accessing the environmental controls. We can't pull them all the way down, but we can change their trajectory. Get them lower. 60 seconds. Lyra's fingers joined his on the panel, their hands working in perfect synchronization. They'd done this before, worked together during the meteor shield failure last month, their different ways of thinking complementing each other perfectly. He provided the human intuition and creativity. She provided the processing speed and technical precision. Together, they were better than either could be alone. He'd realized that about more than just work lately. The vents activated with a soft hum. Through the window, Jake saw the cub's hair and clothes begin to move, pulled gently downward. Tommy understood immediately, pushing the younger children down, using his own body to shield them. The older twins spread out, creating drag. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, they sank toward the floor. 30 seconds. They're not going to make it. Lyra's voice was steady, but her hand found Jake's again, gripping tight. They're still 2 meters up, then we go in. Jake made the decision in an instant. Open the door manually. The emergency release. Jake, we'll fall too. And we're heavier. From that height, I know the math. He was already pulling the emergency release lever, the one that required physical strength that most Astryn didn't have. The door began to crack open. Get ready to catch them. Lyra didn't argue. She simply nodded, her whole body tensing like a spring. The moment the door opened wide enough, she dove through, moving through zero gravity like she was born to it. Because she was. Jake followed, clumsier, but determined. 15 seconds. Lyra reached the cubs first, her arms gathering Mira and David. Jake grabbed Tommy and one of the twins. The other children clung to them. Brace, Lyra shouted. Jake pulled the cubs close, wrapping his arms around them, and then he and Lyra locked eyes. She reached out her free hand, and he grabbed it, pulling their group together in the center of the room. 10 seconds. In that moment, floating there with the children between them, their hands clasped together, Jake saw something in Lyra's eyes. Fear, yes. Determination. But also something else. Something that mirrored what he'd been feeling for months, but had been too afraid to name. I trust you, she said softly, just for him. Whatever happens next. 5 seconds. Gravity slammed back like a hammer. Jake's stomach lurched as they fell, but Lyra was already moving. She twisted in midair, her Astryn reflexes allowing her to do what should have been impossible. She pushed the children down and away, toward the padded chairs and soft surfaces along the room's edge, using her own body as a springboard. The cubs landed hard but safe, tumbling into the cushioned furniture. Lyra and Jake weren't as lucky. They hit the floor together, Jake managing to turn his shoulder to take the impact. Pain exploded through his arm, but he heard Lyra gasp beside him, and that concerned him more than his own injury. Everyone okay? Tommy's voice, shaky but functional. We're okay, Uncle Jake. Jake sat up, wincing. His shoulder was definitely dislocated, but the cubs were climbing to their feet, crying, but moving. Nothing broken. Lyra was beside him, her arm wrapped around her ribs. Don't move, Jake said. You used yourself as a launching pad. Your ribs will heal, she said firmly. The cubs are safe. That's what matters. She looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled despite the pain. We did it. You did it. Jake corrected. That aerial maneuver was impossible. Nothing's impossible when someone is counting on you. She reached out, touching his face gently. You taught me that. The moment was interrupted by Tommy's voice, high and frightened. Uncle Jake. David didn't mean to. We were just exploring, and he touched the button, and we didn't know it would do that. Jake looked at David. The 6-year-old was sobbing, his small body shaking. Mira had her arms around him, and Lyra pulled herself to her feet despite her injured ribs, limping over to kneel beside the children. David, she said gently, her musical voice soothing. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Between sobs, David explained. They'd been playing hide and seek. He'd found the room with the door open, which should never happen. There was a nice man inside, wearing a maintenance uniform, who said David could help him with an important job. All he had to do was press his hand on the button when the man told him to. David thought he was helping. He didn't know it would turn off gravity. What did the man look like? Jake asked, exchanging a glance with Lyra. Tommy answered. We only saw him for a second. He ran out right after David pressed it. The door locked behind him. Marcus, one of the twins, added. He had weird gloves on. They were glowing a little bit. Lyra's expression hardened. Biometric spoofing gloves. They can fake any handprint. The pieces fell into place. Someone had deliberately used a child to shut down the station's gravity. A child's handprint wouldn't be in the security logs as suspicious. It was the perfect cover. But why? What was the goal? The answer came seconds later when Jake's communicator crackled to life. Commander Morrison, this is Security Chief Ramos. We have a situation. During the gravity failure, someone accessed the xenobiology lab. They've stolen the Astryn translation device. Jake's blood went cold. The translation device was the key to the peace talks happening next month between human and Astryn governments. It was an ancient Astryn artifact that could perfectly translate not just words, but intent and emotion between species. Without it, the negotiations would fail. And some people wanted exactly that. Lyra stood slowly, her face set with determination despite her obvious pain. This was a distraction. Create chaos with the gravity failure, keep security busy with rescue operations, and slip into the lab unnoticed. But they used a child, Jake said, fury building in his chest. They put every person on this station at risk, including 6 kids, for a political statement. Not just a statement, Lyra said quietly. An act of war. Whoever did this wants our peoples to turn against each other. She looked at the cubs, all of them watching with wide, frightened eyes. They're willing to sacrifice anyone to make that happen. Jake made a decision. He pulled himself to his feet, ignoring the screaming pain in his shoulder. Not on my station. He opened a communication channel. Chief Ramos, seal all airlocks and shuttle bays. No one leaves. And scan for those biometric gloves. They have a unique energy signature. To Lyra, he said, the translation device. Does it have a tracking mechanism? Lyra nodded. A quantum beacon, but only Astryn can detect it. The frequency is beyond human sensory range, but you can find it. It wasn't a question. I can try. But Jake, your shoulder needs medical attention. And my ribs can wait. He stepped closer to her, close enough to see the swirls of deeper violet in her eyes, close enough to feel the cool luminescence of her skin. Someone just declared war on everything we've been trying to build here. A place where humans and Astryn work together, live together, trust each other. His voice dropped. I'm not letting them win. Lyra held his gaze for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them. All the late-night conversations in the observation deck, watching Jupiter's storms. All the shared meals, learning about each other's cultures. All the times their hands had brushed and lingered just a moment too long. All the feelings neither had been brave enough to voice. Together then, she said softly, and the word felt like a promise of more than just the mission. They left the cubs with Security Chief Ramos, who arrived with a medical team. As the doctor worked on Jake's shoulder, snapping it back into place with a nauseating pop, Jake watched Lyra. Her eyes were closed, her head tilted slightly, and the pointed tips of her ears were glowing faintly. What's she doing? The doctor whispered. Astryn can sense quantum frequencies, Jake explained, gritting his teeth against the pain. She's listening for the beacon. Lyra's eyes opened. I have it. Sector 7, near the old construction area, the part of the station that was being renovated. Lots of empty corridors and disabled security cameras. Perfect place to hide. Jake checked his weapon, a standard stun pistol. Lyra did the same. We should wait for backup, Chief Ramos said. We don't have time, Lyra countered. If they get that device off the station, the peace talks fail. And my people and yours go back to suspicion and fear, Jake added. We'll be careful. Just keep everyone away from Sector 7 until we give the all clear. They moved through the station quickly, Jake's shoulder aching but functional thanks to a pain blocker. Lyra was moving more carefully, one arm wrapped around her ribs, but her eyes were sharp and focused. The signal's getting stronger, she murmured. Close now. They entered the construction zone, the corridor dark and silent. Emergency lights cast long shadows. Jake moved forward cautiously, his weapon ready. Beside him, Lyra suddenly stopped, her hand shooting out to grab his arm. Wait, she breathed. Something's wrong. The signal. The explosion of sound and light came from everywhere at once. Flashbangs. Jake's vision went white, his ears ringing. He felt Lyra's hand torn from his arm, heard her cry out. When his vision cleared seconds later, they were surrounded. 5 figures in maintenance uniforms, their faces covered. But what made Jake's heart sink was their mixed composition. 3 humans, 2 Astryn, identifiable by their pointed ears visible beneath their masks. You see, one of the Astryn said, his voice bitter. Even now, they come to stop us. Humans can't let us have what's ours. What's yours? Lyra's voice was sharp despite her pain. That device belongs to all Astryn, not to you. It's meant to build bridges, not burn them. One of the humans laughed harshly. Bridges? You aliens want to take over, control our stations, our planets. This device would let you manipulate our leaders, make them think they understand you, when really you're just twisting their thoughts. That's not how it works. Lyra shouted. It translates truth. That's all. Pure truth and intent. If you'd ever actually tried to understand our cultures instead of fearing them. Enough talk, the first Astryn said. He held up a case glowing faintly. The translation device. We're leaving. Try to stop us, and we detonate the charges we've placed throughout this sector. The explosion will be blamed on structural failure from the gravity incident. Tragic accident. Jake's mind raced. They were serious. These weren't just thieves or terrorists. They were fanatics from both sides, working together to tear their peoples apart by making it look like they couldn't work together. The irony was sickening. You're proving nothing, Jake said, stepping forward despite the weapons pointed at him. Except that extremists exist in every species. But you know what? So do people who choose to be better. He looked at Lyra, and she met his eyes. In that moment, he made a choice. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it would get them killed. But he was done letting fear dictate the future. Jake reached out and took Lyra's hand, intertwining their fingers. Human and Astryn joined together in front of their enemies. Her people call it Tashara, Jake said, his voice steady and clear. A bond of absolute trust. Humans don't have a perfect translation, but the closest we have is this. I trust her with my life, my future, and my heart. Not because we're the same, but because our differences make us stronger together. Lyra's hand tightened on his, her luminescent skin glowing brighter. And my people would say he has the courage to stand in the space between stars, where there is no solid ground, only faith that someone will be there to catch you. Her voice strengthened. You want to destroy the peace talks? You want our peoples at war? Then kill us. Because we won't stop fighting for a future where a human and an Astryn can stand side by side, hand in hand, and no one thinks it's strange or wrong or dangerous. The extremists hesitated. Jake saw it in their body language, the slight lowering of weapons, the exchange of uncertain glances. They're just words, one of the humans said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, said a new voice from behind the extremists. They're not. Chief Ramos stepped into view, flanked by a dozen security officers, both human and Astryn. They're the truth. And you 5 are under arrest for terrorism, child endangerment, and theft of cultural artifacts. The fight went out of the extremists. Without their element of surprise and fear, they were just 5 people with a bad idea. As security took them away and retrieved the translation device, Jake felt the adrenaline drain away, leaving exhaustion and pain. His shoulder was screaming, and Lyra was leaning heavily against him, her injured ribs clearly causing her significant pain. Come on, he said gently. Medical bay. Now. Together? She asked softly. And there was a vulnerability in her voice he'd never heard before. Always, he promised. 3 hours later, Jake sat in the observation deck, his shoulder properly treated and immobilized in a sling. The doctors had wanted to keep him overnight, but he'd insisted on being released. There was something he needed to do. Lyra found him there, her ribs wrapped, but her movement easier after the Astryn healing techniques the medical team had applied. She sat beside him on the bench, close enough that their shoulders touched, and they looked out at Jupiter together, its great red spot swirling in eternal storm. "The cubs are okay," Lyra said. "Mira asked if she could visit me tomorrow. She wants to learn more about Astryn culture." "Tommy asked me if you were my girlfriend," Jake said, then felt his face heat. "I didn't know what to tell him." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "What did you want to tell him?" Jake turned to face her fully, taking in the sight of her in the soft starlight. Her platinum hair, her pointed ears, her violet eyes that seemed to hold galaxies. So alien, and yet so perfectly right. "The truth," he said, "that I've been falling for you since the day you corrected my gravitational calculations and then apologized for making me feel bad, even though you were absolutely right. That every moment I spend with you makes me believe in a better future. That the idea of you leaving when your assignment ends makes me feel like I'm losing gravity all over again." Lyra's eyes glistened with tears, and her skin glowed so brightly she could have lit the room. "My people have a saying, Korastil Teshar Morvana, the courage to trust is the bridge between stars." She took his hand, the one not in a sling, and pressed it to her chest, where her heart beat in a rhythm just slightly faster than human. "You are my bridge, Jake Morrison. My proof that different doesn't mean impossible." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft and careful and full of promise. When they parted, both were smiling. "So, girlfriend?" Lyra asked, a teasing lilt to her voice. "I believe the human term is absolutely," Jake said, making her laugh. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars, two people from different worlds who'd found something rare and precious, a connection that transcended the space between them. The next day, the translation device was used in an emergency session between human and Astryn leadership. The perpetrators had been from a radical coalition group called the Purists, mixed members from both species who'd been working together to create conflict while pretending to support their own side. The irony of their cooperation being exposed led to widespread condemnation from both governments, and actually strengthened the push for the peace talks. But perhaps the most important outcome happened 3 weeks later, when a new protocol was implemented across all joint human Astryn stations. It was called the Cubs Protocol, a comprehensive safety system designed and tested by children from both species working together. Tommy and Mira became best friends during the project, proving that the youngest among them were often the wisest. Jake and Lyra continued their work on Stellar Station 7, but now everyone knew they were together. Some people whispered, some people stared, but most people smiled, because love is love, whether it crosses streets or solar systems. 6 months after the gravity incident, Jake stood in the same observation deck, watching Jupiter's storms, waiting. Lyra arrived exactly on time, as always, but this time she wasn't alone. She brought her parents visiting from the Astryn homeworld, and Jake's sister and nephew had arrived from Earth. Both families looked nervous, but Lyra and Jake stood together, hands intertwined, steady and sure. "Thank you all for coming," Jake began. "We wanted you to be the first to know." Lyra finished the thought, as she so often did. "We're getting married." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Tommy whooped. Mira cheered through the video call she'd insisted on being part of, and slowly, uncertainly, but genuinely, both families began to smile. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, cultural differences, and yes, people who disapproved. But as Jake looked at Lyra, his partner in every sense of the word, he remembered what she'd said during those 3 terrifying minutes when gravity failed and everything hung in the balance. Nothing's impossible when someone is counting on you. 3 minutes of weightlessness had brought them together. A lifetime of gravity would keep them that way. And somewhere in the station, in the newly renovated gravity control room that now had about 100 additional safety protocols, there was a small plaque that the Cubs had installed. It read, "The space between stars is only empty if you're afraid to reach across it." We weren't afraid. The Cubs of Stellar Station 7. Every child who'd been in that room had signed it. human and Astryn names together in a list that made no distinction between them. That plaque became famous, reproduced on posters and shirts across both civilizations. But the original remained on Stellar Station 7, a reminder that sometimes the smallest hands can push the biggest buttons. And sometimes 3 minutes of chaos is exactly what's needed to show people what really matters. Jake and Lyra visited it often, sometimes alone, sometimes with the cubs, who'd inadvertently changed the course of history. And every time, they held hands and remembered the day that gravity failed. But something stronger held them all together: hope, courage, and the simple, revolutionary act of choosing trust over fear.